Hello everybody and welcome to this painting video with myself, John. In this one we're going to be tackling Emily Nouguier. I definitely got that name wrong. This is from the Enlightened faction from the 2-player starter set for Wild West Exodus. Now, I know there's hopefully a few new hobbyists in there. If you are, welcome. In the previous video that we did where we were painting Tesla, there's a whole preamble on how to get started with painting, what primers do, what kind of tools are recommended, that sort of thing. And if you've come to this video first and you're a new painter, I do recommend you go and check out the Tesla video, and you can get all that preamble in there and get stuck in. However, if you've already watched it, I hope you enjoyed it, and nothing else to say, let's get stuck in. So to begin with Emily, I'm going to just say that the priming and the zenithing process was the exact same, and the first thing I want to do is take a contrast paint called Basilicanum Grey, because this is going to be one of the primary colours of her, because from what I've seen, the Enlightened are kind of more greys with gold trim or brass trim, a little darker than the Union colour scheme. So we're going to be starting with this, and that's going to work to basically cover the cloth that she's wearing, because she's kind of wearing what almost feels like a sort of a one-piece kind of bodysuit that has her belts and armor and whatnot over the top of it, and we're going to be using the Basilicanum Grey to get that down first. So we're going to be fairly liberal with the application of this, so we'll go fairly heavy, and there are going to be pieces that will go different colors later on, but they shouldn't be too bad. So we'll just go for it over all the cloth detail that she's wearing and see how that turns out. With the Basilicanum Grey now dry, we can have a look and see what it has done on Emily, and it is really done a nice job on that clothing, and that's all good. So we're ready to move on to our next step. For the next step, we're going to be tackling the leather work. So I'm going to tackle the boots and all the leather strapping that's going around this suit, as well as at least the knee pads. Possibly maybe this piece up here, which is holding tools, will maybe do that as a leather colour. And for that, we're going to go with Gorgrunta fur. Now, you might remember from the first tutorial, we were using Gorgrunta fur for a bright sort of brown colour, but because of this Basilicanum Grey is down here now, this is going to be darker, simply because of the colour underneath being darker. So it's still going to be brighter than most of the browns that we're using, but at the same time, once I select the correct brush here, what we're going to attempt to do here is basically just find pieces that we want to be this leather color. So we're going to start up here first on this tool holder and just paint all that in. Now, there is other things on there. There's items on there that we might want to have as different colors later on, but we'll tackle that later. It'll just be a case of rebase coating and maybe adding a wash onto them later. But for now, we're just going to add that in as a piece of leather work. With the Cygor Brown now dry, we can have a look at a happy little accident that we've had here. Because we didn't put any Basilicanum Grey onto her boots, this one paint has given us two colors. So we've got this darker, richer brown on all the leather work, but on her boots we've got what's clearly a different item, a different style or different color of leather, and it's a bit brighter. So that's something to think about as well when you're coming to paint. Will a certain color do 2 steps for me if I base coat correctly or not? So what we're going to be moving on to from here is an accent color, and the accent color is going to go on to the central part of this shoulder, and there's also 2 more straps on her legs that I wanted to keep aside for an accent color, and for that we're going to be using Riley Grey from Scale Color. This is a Scale 75 paint, a very good range again, very solid range, and we're going to put some of that down there onto our palette. And this is basically the first step before we start on some metallic work. So we'll start on the shoulder here real quick and just put in a little bit of this. It looks like it's going to need another coat, so maybe a couple of coats to bring this grey up. But apart from that, this should be pretty straightforward and pretty simple. So we'll leave that there for now. And then the straps that I want to do on her legs sort of look like they're more part of the suit that she's wearing, so I wanted to give that a bit of colour as well. Now, I could have gone brighter here, but I decided that keeping her basic clothing fairly dark will let us have plenty of contrast come through later on when we do the metallic work, and a little bit of brass detailing as well. So we'll just get this one in. There's two more that run on the inside of her legs, but I feel that if you're wearing a uniform, the brighter or the accent color really should just stay on the outside. We don't want to do too much. So that's basically all I want to do there. Try and keep her palette fairly dark. And the next thing I'm going to do is move on to some metallics, or our first metallics anyway. And for that, we're going to be using Citadel's base color, Lead Belcher. And this is going to be for the majority of the mechanical parts on the Mini. So we'll get some of that put onto our palette. And then we can look at what we're going to do. So we're going to take the dog's head in, this mechanical dog that's on her, she's holding in one hand. That'll be one piece. We're then going to do the majority of this arm, and we'll come back to do some brass detailing on it later as well. So we're going to take all that in. So all up on this area here, that's all going to go metallic. Same down here on her shins. I think we're going to make them silver as well, and just pick out a few pieces like on the back of her body armor here as well. With the Lead Belcher down, let's have a look at the areas that I've done. So we'll start on the top. So we went with her goggles, this sort of shoulder piece here right down onto her arm, the back of her body armor there as well, including this piece on her back, and then the tools on her hip, and the dog head, and then right on down through belt buckles and so on, down to the shin guards. So from this point, we're going to move on to some gold, and to differentiate her more from the other faction, we're going to go with a different type of gold, which is from Dark Star, which is their antique gold. This is a very good paint as well. It's not as bright as the stuff we've used previously, but it has this lovely muted color to it, so it works really well, and I think it's going to complement the color scheme overall. So let's get some onto our brush. Nice and careful with it. So areas that we're looking for here, the likes of the details on this forearm. So we want to take that whole plate in, for example. Just be nice and gentle with the brush movements. And then there's little bits on the base of each of these claws. There's more, and I'll get to them too. But that's the kind of gold that we're looking at there, a sort of lovely muted color. It's not as bright, it's not as poppy. Once we put a wash down on this, it's going to look great. So we're just going to push on now and just pick out everything else that we want to have this antique gold on. With the gold now dry, we'll once again have a look around to see the details that we've filled in. So we've done the banding on this shoulder, we've done the little extra eyepiece that's down by the side of her face, a few other details like this other shoulder guard, and the small details that are on her arm and claw, and not really much else. So what we're really quickly going to do is pick a quick little color here for the tool that's got, I think it's a chisel, and for that we're going to use, this is Vallejo USA Tan Earth, so just a fairly subtle brown. Just a little drop of that. That's a little bit too much on the palette, but okay. So it's just to get that brown in there, that color in there, because in the next step we're going to be applying a wash over the whole Mini. So I just want to get the handle of this chisel, just again to add another color, something that just every color we add adds a bit of visual interest and accentuates the sort of the narrative of this miniature. She feels like a mechanical minded person, so the more we accentuate that, the better. So at this stage, we're going to let that dry, but we are going to get a start on our wash, which for this case is going to be Nuln Oil. And this is just going to help, as it did with the last video, it's going to help tidy in and sharpen up some of our shading. So we're going to start applying that, and it's going to go all over the Mini. We're going to avoid our newly painted detail for now, but it's just to make sure we've got this process started. We don't want to be too liberal, as Nuln Oil will seek out all the nooks and crannies on the miniature anyway, and just help with that sharpening of detail and adding a little bit of depth to the contrast paint work already. Because as I said previously, contrast paint tends to look a little, or can look a little chalky if you don't put anything over the top of it. So it's always handy just to have a wash next to you, just to go ahead and give the miniature a coat of that. Now that the Nuln Oil is dry, we can move on to a couple more base coating steps. The first one, we're going to do her skin with Vallejo Heavy Skin Tone. We're also going to do her hair, and for her hair we're going to be using Lilith Yellow, so we're going to be going quite a blonde sort of tone, but again we're going to be using a contrast paint like with the skin tone to tie that all together. So we're going to get to the skin tone first. Just put a little bit on the palette, don't need too much of this. And then get our brush. Put a bit of water on the brush because it seems a bit stiff from the last paint. And then we're just going to carefully paint in the skin, and once that's done, we'll then paint in the hair. With the skin and the hair base coated, we're now going to work on our last few steps here, and they're basically all contrast steps. So the first one we're going to do for her hair is using contrast Nazdrag Yellow. This is sort of a dirty yellow, and should, in theory, like in my head, I know it should complement the color that we've put down for her hair. So let's very carefully apply that and see what we get. So she's maybe not going to be a blonde, eh? So but it's going to be quite a striking tone. I think it's going to be quite an interesting hair color. So we'll get that in. Let's not touch the skin if we can help it. And it's quite the charming hair color, almost a ginger. So after that, our next one is for her skin, which we're going to be using Gilliman Flesh. Again, the same one we used on the last video. And this is just going to be a quick little, just apply it to the skin and let it do the work. Now, our final thing is another accent color. Again, another contrast paint, and this is Blood Angels Red. We're going to be using that just to fill in a few little details here, some lenses and some other colors that we want to help make her pop just a little bit more. So for the Blood Angels Red, we're going to do the lenses of her goggles. We'll also do that secondary lens down by the side of her face. And then there's this area on the shoulder that I kept blank as well. Wipe off that little bit of excess. We could also go in and do the center of this piece on her back. Again, just anything to add a little bit of poppy visual interest here. And I think we'll also do the center of this big belt buckle. Since the Cyberdog is most assuredly switched off, we're not going to need any color in its eyes. So with that done, I'm going to let all of these dry, and like in the first video, we're going to be matte coating or giving the model a matte varnish, which again will be AK Interactive Ultra Matte, because it's just great. And once that's done, we'll paint the base black, and then we'll have a look at her once she's all complete. With the matte varnish dry, the base painted black, we now have Emily finished, and I think she looks pretty damn good. So once you've seen everything down, like all the different colours, the elements that have gone into it, the washes, and once we put down that matte varnish, we get a surprisingly high contrast miniature. It's more down to her skin and her hair with the little flashes of red that are playing on in there. So I mean, from up close, she looks pretty decent, but it's more important to us from a gaming perspective that she looks good from a higher angle and a little further away. So when you actually have her down on a tabletop, she's actually going to look, you know, easily recognizable as one of your named characters. You'll always know where she is, and she's going to stand out and look pretty decent on her own. So as always, I always let you guys, the viewers, decide what sort of basing you would put on your stuff. There's plenty of tutorials and stuff out there just to check out, and you know, you can base your miniatures however you want. So until next time, take care, stay safe, and see you again very soon.
Join the Global Gunslinger League and track your progress in the OnTableTop project system for your chance to win one of 2 Wild West Exodus bundles. See the link in the description for more details.
Go ahead and check out our other content on screen now. And while you're at it, why not hit subscribe and remember to ding our dong. Go on, you know you want to click it. Go on.